Drivetime on RTE Radio 1, sponsored by the RSA. Almost half of pedestrians killed on Irish roads have been drinking. If you're going out, plan getting home.
Now, Ryanair says it must cancel 24 flights to Britain on Friday due to planned industrial action by pilots. Around 100 members of the Irish Airline Pilots Association, which is part of the Forsa union, are in dispute with Ryanair over base transfers, promotions and leave, among other issues. Eoghan Corry is the editor of Travel Extra and he joins us now. Eoghan, what more do we know about these cancellations?
Good afternoon, Sarah. Well, we were in uncharted territory. This is the first time Ryanair has been in negotiations with unions, but very quickly we have reached a pattern with these. That is that Ryanair tends to jump early. We know that from the issues before with ash cloud and weather events. They're one of the first airlines to say we're cancelling the flights and this is the new reality. They've been doing that with the strike. The flights were cancelled in advance of talks which began today. And it does look like we have to work our way through a situation between Ryanair and IALPA, where IALPA are determined to see how much disruption they can cause by calling strikes, and Ryanair cancelling in advance, trying to minimise the damage and trying to protect the sun routes.
And in terms of those flights which have been cancelled, you mentioned protecting the sun routes. All the flights are to Britain, is that right?
That's where they've been looking. They've been looking at the trunk routes, the ones that would have 9, 10, 11 flights a day. They managed last Thursday, and remember, Ryanair has flown through 4 different strikes in different countries, but last Thursday said the potential to cause the most damage. They look to moving their passengers on the same day to an earlier flight or to the day before. What happened last week was they accommodated about 90% of the passengers, about 10% took a refund. Just 12 were rerouted on another airline, Aer Lingus. And this to strike on Friday, there is fewer flights cancelled. I do think we will see a determination by Ryanair to fly through the strikes. While IALPA are also feeling their way on this, as you say, they have the support of 94 of the pilots, but there are 250 pilots in Dublin continuing to work, and they don't seem to be joining IALPA's concern over what really are procedural issues that make no sense to the passengers who are disrupted. Do
we have any idea at this point, Eoghan, how many people or passengers are affected?
Generally, there are 189 seats on each flight, and Ryanair is flying at 96% occupancy. So it's very easy to work it out. There'll be about 3,500 passengers, and again, the same terms will be offered to them, which are refund, which are an alternative flight to the same destination. They're under contract to fly you to the same destination, and they have an offer. Since they worked out, Ryanair have been getting good at this since September, since their self-imposed pilot rostering thing in September. They have been dealing with 4 or 5 other airlines to offer rerouting with the other airline. As I say, only 12 took that up last Thursday. I'd expect even fewer numbers. They seem to be able to cope with it by moving the passengers around within their own network.
In a statement this afternoon, Ryanair claimed that this second day of strike by pilots was unnecessary. What's their reasoning for that?
There doesn't seem to be anything moving forward from Ryanair's point of view. IALPA had achieved what they set out to do. They had disrupted the flights, and we had what seemed to be a bit of a pantomime of talks that got underway last week with no real progress, and that seems to be the little dance that's being played out. It isn't unusual in trade union terms. It isn't unusual in aviation. This would be pretty much the norm across Europe. It isn't confined to IALPA that there are a lot of standoffs and threats made, and then you do these 11 things or we go on strike, and that seems to be what's happening here. Ryanair wouldn't have been in those sort of talks before, but that's pretty normal across the industry, and airlines get very good at it very quickly. I suspect Ryanair will will be learning in that they have been flying around Europe signing deals with a lot of the unions. I think the Irish trade unions, for historical reasons, are slower to the table, slower to come to the table and slower to sign out the agreement. But let's hope, for the sake of passengers, that all the angst and the bad blood will be worked out with a few strike threats without too much disruption, and eventually we'll get some sort of deal, but I don't see it happening in the next couple of weeks.
And sorry, that was just my next question, and very briefly, Eoghan, if there was to be some breakthrough in the talks, do you see any chance of these cancelled flights being put back on the schedule?
No, the flights are cancelled. That's the way Ryanair operate. They offer certainty, and they're punctuality is everything to them. They're unlike Aer Lingus, which would be flying in and out of Dublin and Shannon to countries and coming back again. Ryanair flights take off in the morning and go maybe to 4 or 5 different countries in what are called W patterns. Interestingly, Ryanair's strength is that the size of the operation, like the 95 pilots out of 4,000, doesn't seem like a lot, but they haven't. They've resisted the temptation to bring pilots in from other bases to prevent any cancellations at all in Dublin. I think Ryanair position is that they can see out the strength, the threats from IALPA. From IALPA's point of view, they would probably be hoping to grow that membership and cause, steadily more disruption, as they call strikes. I suspect a series of these strike threats.
Eoghan Corry, editor of Travel Extra, thank you very much for joining us this afternoon.